Sometimes life hands you a gift so perfect, you immediately start looking for the catch, because nothing this good comes without someone, somewhere, trying to ruin it. For me, that gift was a pristine lakeside cabin in Pine Ridge Estates, inherited from my late Uncle Harold, a man of impeccable taste, legendary stubbornness, and apparently a burning desire to irritate every HOA officer within a 10-mile radius, judging by the eye rolls at his memorial. The cabin wasn't just a house, it was the house. 2 acres of waterfront heaven, hand-cut stone fireplace, private dock, wraparound porch with actual wraparound views, and enough privacy to do unspeakable things to a bottle of bourbon without judgment. Uncle Harold had bought it back in the 80s, back when Pine Ridge was a sleepy collection of fishing shacks and rusty aluminum boats. Now, it's a gated luxury community, a phrase that seems to attract 2 things in particular: overpriced SUVs and people who collect petty rules like their Pokemon cards. Enter our antagonist, Linda Morrison, HOA president, local real estate agent, self-appointed queen of Pine Ridge. Picture someone who permanently smells like lemon pledge and passive aggression. Linda was the kind of woman who spoke exclusively in the tone of a disappointed teacher and smiled like she'd just stepped on a puppy, but only because she thought it looked too unsanitary to be walking around barefoot. She'd been circling my cabin like a buzzard in pearls ever since Uncle Harold's memorial. And I do mean circling. She showed up to the funeral, uninvited, wearing heels that screamed, "Sell you a house and your soul," and passing out business cards like they were communion wafers. "So tragic," she'd murmured, sliding her card into my hand with all the subtlety of a Vegas blackjack dealer. "If you ever need help with the property transition, I'm here for you, and for the community." Translation: I've already picked out drapes for the virtual staging and scheduled an open house next Tuesday. I should have known then, but I was too busy grieving Harold and figuring out what to do with a 2-acre lakeside slice of heaven that now had my name on the deed. I decided to do what Harold would have done: ignore the HOA, stock the fridge, and escape from the city for a few weeks. I brought my work laptop, a stack of mystery novels, and a sincere commitment to pretending email didn't exist. For days in, paradise was shaping up nicely. Morning coffee on the dock, loons calling across the lake, the soft hum of peace, interrupted only by the occasional HOA newsletter warning about non-regulation bird feeders. Then disaster struck, because of course it did. My business partner called from the city, voice tight with panic. Something about a server crash, corrupt backups, and the looming threat of a client meltdown large enough to trigger a quarterly earnings apocalypse. "I need you here," he begged. "Today, we're about to lose them." So, I packed my bag, cursed technology, and knocked on my neighbor's door. Mrs. Chun, former librarian, current flower enthusiast, and the only person on the HOA board not powered entirely by spite. "I'll be back in 3 days," I told her. "Maybe 2, if the tech gods smile on me." She waved her watering can and smiled. "Drive safe, dear. I'll keep an eye on the place." Now, what I should have said was, "Please guard my home like a dragon guards treasure, because Linda Morrison is lurking, and I'm not convinced she doesn't have blueprints of my house stashed in her car." But hindsight is a snarky little thing. The client catastrophe turned out to be a mild drama, caused, shockingly, by human error and not the rise of sentient software. I had everything sorted by Saturday morning. With the fires put out and my inbox relatively tame, I realized there was no reason to wait until Monday. I threw my bag in the trunk and started the 3-hour drive back to the cabin, daydreaming about cold beer and an uncivilized dinner eaten barefoot on the dock. I rolled up to the cabin around 9 p.m., just as the sun was dipping below the treeline. It was supposed to be a peaceful return. Keyword: supposed. 2 cars were parked in my driveway. And not just any cars. Linda's gleaming white Lexus SUV, complete with her personalized plate, "Sold for you," because of course it was, and a sleek black sedan so squeaky clean it practically screamed, "I'm a rental, and my driver thinks cargo shorts are formal wear." For a few confused seconds, I just stood there, key in hand, brain buffering. Was this some kind of emergency? A community safety inspection? Had Linda somehow convinced the city my pine trees were infringing on airspace regulations? Then I heard voices. From inside my cabin. Voices discussing furniture, floor plans, lakefront access. I walked to the window, leaned in, and peeked. Linda was in my living room, swiping and tapping on a tablet like she was the queen of Zillow, while a couple, 50s, polished, the kind who probably say things like, "We summer in Nantucket," walked around like they were picking out curtains. As you can see, Linda purred, gesturing toward my hand-carved coffee table. The furnishings are included. Very tasteful. The previous owner had impeccable judgment. My jaw hit the deck. She was selling my house. My actual house. I stood frozen, adrenaline surging, mind racing through scenarios. Kick the door down? Call the cops? Rent a marching band and start a full-blown confrontation? Instead, I did what any modern tech-savvy adult would do. I took out my phone and hit record. Here's a pro tip for anyone planning to illegally sell someone else's house. Maybe don't narrate your crime loudly through the windows. Just a thought. I moved to the back of the cabin like a silent, very angry ninja in business casual. The back door was, shocker, unlocked. Because if you're going to commit felony trespassing, why not just go for the hat trick and bypass locks altogether? I slipped inside, phone camera rolling, and crouched behind the hallway that led into the living room. The place still smelled like cedar and lake air, except now it also reeked of entitlement and lavender perfume. Linda was in full realtor mode TM. You know the one. Big hand gestures, faux enthusiasm, and that weird realtor voice where everything sounds like a car commercial. At $485,000, she said, tapping her tablet with a French manicured finger, you're getting a steal for a lakefront property in Pine Ridge. And of course, everything conveys. Even the artwork. The artwork. You mean the painting I got from my uncle? A moody oil landscape he did himself in 1992 while apparently feeling very angry at the concept of boats? She was offering it up like a throw pillow at Crate and Barrel. The husband, clad in a salmon-colored polo and loafers so polished they reflected guilt, was nodding like he was already imagining himself grilling steaks on my back porch. His wife had zero chill. She was caressing my bookshelf like it owed her money. Is the owner local? She asked. Linda's smile shifted into full snake oil mode. Technically, yes. But he inherited the property and hasn't been around much. Frankly, he's not emotionally attached. Very motivated to sell. That was when I lost it. I clicked the video off, stood up, and stepped into the room like I was about to audition for Dateline. Actually, I said, voice calm but soaked in acid, the owner is extremely attached to the property. In fact, he's standing in it. You know how in action movies there's that moment where everyone freezes mid-sentence and slowly turns to face the hero in slow motion? That happened. Except instead of dramatic music, we had Linda trying to reboot her entire facial expression like a glitchy Sims character. Oh, she squeaked. You're back. Surprise, I said, smiling like I'd just found her diary, and it was full of felony confessions. Had a change of plans. Imagine my shock when I came home to a real estate showing. In my house. That I own. The husband took a nervous step back, gripping his wife's arm like he expected me to pull a sword out of the couch cushions. Wait, this is your property. I pulled out my license like it was a mic drop. Sure is. Inherited it 6 months ago. Been fixing it up, loving every second. Never listed it. Never gave permission to anyone to list it. Definitely never invited Ms. Morrison to host a literal open house. The wife turned to Linda, all country club calm, TM gone from her face. You said the owner was eager to sell. You said this was an exclusive early showing. Linda's eyes darted around like she was about to fake her own death. I misunderstood. I thought he was interested. There was a community meeting. He said something about the property being expensive to maintain. I laughed. I actually laughed. Linda, the only thing I said at that meeting was that your vendetta against my doc was ridiculous. I haven't spoken to you in 3 months. The buyers started backing up like they'd stumbled into a hostage negotiation. This isn't what we signed up for, the husband mumbled. We're going to leave. Linda lunged forward with a panicked smile. Wait, please, It's just a misunderstanding. I can explain. You can explain to the police, I said, pulling out my phone. You've broken into my property, misrepresented yourself as having authority to sell it, and used a key I never gave you. That's not a misunderstanding. That's real estate fraud. Linda's face drained of color so fast, it was like someone unplugged her. No, don't call the police. There's no need for that. No harm done. No harm. I echoed. Linda, I walked into my home and found strangers pricing my furniture like it's an estate sale. You're lucky I didn't walk in with a baseball bat and a bad attitude. The buyers were already gone. They practically bolted, whispering something about calling their lawyer. Linda stood frozen in the middle of my living room, arms stiff at her sides, like if she didn't move the consequences wouldn't see her. I walked to the coffee table and noticed something I hadn't seen before. A realtor lockbox. You know, the kind agents used to store keys for showings. Except I didn't authorize any showings. Which meant, Linda, I said, voice low, please tell me you didn't make a copy of my key. I know. I mean, it's not what you think. I held up the lockbox. Because what I think is that you've been sneaking in here with buyers, using a key you made without my knowledge, and selling a property you have zero legal claim to. Linda's eyes darted toward the door. Let's just calm down. Talk this through. No need to escalate. Oh, we're well past escalate. I pointed to the lockbox. You brought this. You installed this. That's deliberate. That's premeditated. How many times have you done this? I was just testing the market, she said, as if that somehow made this better. You should really consider listing. Prices are soaring. Prices won't be the only thing soaring. You're about 5 minutes away from being arrested for breaking and entering, Linda. I could see the realization land on her like a grand piano in a cartoon. She tried a new tactic, conspiratorial charm. Look, we're neighbors. Let's not make this messy. I'll leave. We'll forget this happened. Clean slate. That's rich coming from someone who broke into my home and tried to liquidate my life assets. Just then, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the night air like divine judgment. Linda blinked. What's that? I smiled. That would be the police. I called them the moment I saw your car in my driveway. And just like that, Linda Morrison's real estate fantasy bubble popped. Hard. There's a certain sound you never forget. The combination of red and blue lights strobing across your lawn and the unmistakable whump-whump of justice rolling up your driveway. Linda, standing in my living room like a realtor caught stealing cookies from the corporate jar, had that exact look you see in nature documentaries right before the gazelle realizes it's surrounded by lions. You called the police? She asked, her voice cracking like a cheap lawn chair. No, I said deadpan. Those are just the HOA welcoming fireworks. Of course I called the police. She started pacing like a politician in a scandal, muttering words like misunderstanding and community service. The woman who 15 minutes ago had been quoting Zestimate values and talking escrow was now praying to the gods of oops. 2 cruisers pulled into my driveway. The lights danced across the walls, and for a moment, my lakefront cabin looked like a crime scene on a Netflix docuseries. Which, honestly, wouldn't be far from the truth. There was a firm knock at the front door. Police. Is anyone inside? Yep. I called back, opening it casually like I did this every Thursday. 2 officers stepped in. Officer Martinez, tall and built like a refrigerator with a badge, and Officer Chun, sharp-eyed and already scribbling in her notepad like this was going in her memoir. Sir, Martinez said, glancing at me and then at Linda, who immediately adopted the expression of a wronged schoolteacher who'd just been accused of theft by a kindergartner. We received a call about a possible break-in. I handed over my ID. Yep, that break-in would be this woman, Linda Morrison, HOA president, real estate agent, part-time cat burglar. Linda held up her hands in that classic, let's not do anything drastic gesture. Officers, I can explain. I was simply showing the property to prospective buyers. It's all a big misunderstanding. Chun tilted her head. Do you have written authorization from the property owner? Well, not exactly. Do you have a listing agreement? I mean, I thought. Did you have permission to be inside this cabin? Martinez asked, now flipping his notepad with the kind of energy that says, "I'm about to write something career-ending." I assumed. "Ma'am," Chen interrupted, "this isn't a choose-your-own-adventure book. Yes or no?" Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish that had forgotten how to breathe. "Sir," Martinez said, turning back to me, "can you explain the situation?" I handed him my phone. "Here's video of her showing my cabin to a couple and quoting them a price. She mentioned a key. I came home early from a business trip and walked in on her trying to sell my home." Chen watched the video, her eyebrows rising steadily. "She told them the property conveyed with the furniture? Right down to the bookshelf," I said. "She even included the artwork. I guess she figured I wouldn't mind giving away the family heirlooms." Linda looked like she was trying to teleport herself into a dimension where this never happened. "I was trying to help," she muttered. "By committing fraud," I said. Martinez gestured to the lockbox on my coffee table. "What's this?" I shrugged, picking it up. "Your guess is as good as mine. But it wasn't here when I left Thursday. Looks like Linda brought her own access system." Linda tried to recover, adopting a professional tone that was about 30% desperation. "That's standard procedure for agents. I installed it because I thought he might decide to sell, and I wanted to be prepared." Chen snapped her notebook closed. "Prepared to illegally access private property?" "There was no malicious intent," Linda stammered. "I was creating opportunities." "Ma'am," Martinez said, "you brought a buyer into a home that wasn't for sale, without permission from the owner, using a key he didn't authorize. That's not just shady, that's a felony." Linda looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon made of regret. "And the kicker," I added, "is that she called 911 to report me as the intruder. That's why you're here, right?" Both officers blinked. Chen turned to Linda. "You called us." Linda hesitated. "Yes. I was startled when he came in. I didn't expect anyone. I was afraid he might be violent." Martinez checked his watch. "Ma'am, the original call came in at 8:41 p.m. Mr. Thompson says he arrived closer to 9 o'clock. Are you saying you predicted his break-in 15 minutes before he arrived?" "I must have lost track of time." Chen raised an eyebrow. "While holding a real estate showing? For a house you don't own?" I thought something was wrong. I was concerned for the community. "Oh, please," I muttered. "You were more concerned about getting your commission." Another cruiser pulled in, this time a supervisor. An older man stepped out, moved with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen way too many HOA dramas and regretted all of them. "Sergeant Williams." "Status?" he asked. Martinez gave a quick summary, ending with, "Unauthorized key, false report, attempted real estate fraud." Williams turned to Linda. "Is that accurate?" Linda opened her mouth, but I jumped in. "She's been harassing me for months. Violation notices, threats about my dock, unsolicited market analyses. Now this. She broke in while I was gone and tried to sell my home. I caught her mid-showing." Williams folded his arms. "Ms. Morrison, do you have any explanation?" Linda blinked. "I'm the HOA president. As of this moment," Williams said, "you're also the primary suspect in an active investigation. And unless you've got a license to impersonate a homeowner, you're in very serious trouble." Linda's voice dropped. "I need to speak to my lawyer." "You'll get that chance," Chen replied. "But first we're going to need that unauthorized key, your tablet, and a full statement." Linda looked at me one last time, eyes wide, still clinging to whatever hope she had left. "This isn't over," she whispered. I leaned in, just loud enough for the officers to hear. "No, Linda. It's finally starting to get very interesting." You ever watch someone dig their own grave with a golden shovel? That was Linda Morrison, armed with entitlement, denial, and a wildly flexible interpretation of facts. Sergeant Williams had the kind of presence that made people confess to stuff they hadn't even done. He turned to Linda like a disappointed father catching his teenager sneaking in after curfew. "Ms. Morrison," he said calmly, "let's walk through this. You called 911. What?" Linda took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders like she was gearing up for a TED Talk. "I saw suspicious activity. I was concerned someone was trying to break in." Williams nodded slowly, as if her sentence was physically painful to process. "Suspicious activity? At a cabin you were already inside?" I was checking on the property. For safety. As the HOA president. He blinked. You were checking on a locked cabin with no reported issues that you don't own and never received permission to enter. I had reason to believe the owner wasn't around. Right? Because you were counting on it. Linda shifted uncomfortably. He's not usually here this time of year. I cut in until I had to leave for a work emergency. I told my neighbor, Mrs. Chun, the only person I actually trust on this street. And I would have told you, Linda shot back, if you ever came to community meetings or responded to HOA emails. Oh, you mean the meetings where you try to find me for having a hammock? Or the time you claimed my bird feeder was impacting migratory flight patterns? Martinez, scribbling notes, didn't even look up. You tried to find him over a bird feeder? Non-regulation seed blend, I said deadpan. Apparently, it was attracting the wrong sort of birds. Chin snorted. That's not even a thing. Williams held up a hand. Focus. Ms. Morrison, you claimed this man was an intruder. Dispatch has your 911 call on record. You described a burglary in progress and suggested the suspect may be armed. Linda's face did a full system reboot. That's not how I meant it. You used the phrase, I think he might be armed. I panicked. You panicked because the rightful owner of a property walked into his own cabin while you were trespassing with buyers you duped into thinking the place was for sale. I thought he might get violent. I raised my eyebrows. Violent. Linda, the only thing I attacked was a frozen pizza when I got here. You screamed louder than the oven timer. Williams stared at her like he was solving a particularly frustrating Sudoku. Let's back up. How did you enter the property? Linda hesitated. The door was unlocked. Untrue, I interjected. It was locked when I left. Always is. Deadbolt, too. Williams nodded at the coffee table. What's the lockbox for? That's standard for showings, she said quickly. I thought, hypothetically, if he ever wanted to sell. So you preemptively installed a lockbox. With a copied key. I wanted to be ready. Ma'am, Officer Chin chimed in. That's like saying you brought your own key to a stranger's house just in case they wanted to sublet. Martinez pointed at her phone. You said earlier that the buyers were scheduled. How many times have you shown this property? Linda went stone silent. 3 times, a voice said from behind the screen door. It was Mrs. Chun, watering can in hand, like the world's calmest whistleblower. I've seen her here with different people at least 3 times this month. I thought it was odd. Now I know why. Linda actually flinched. She always walked around like she owned the place. Mrs. Chun continued. Led them to the dock, pointed out features. I assumed she had permission. Did she ever mention the property was for sale? Williams asked. Mrs. Chun nodded. Oh yes. One couple asked about the chimney, and she said, the new owner won't have to worry about repairs. It's all been maintained beautifully. Linda looked like she was trying to astral project herself into another dimension. That's consistent with what she told us, Chin said. So we now have multiple witnesses, video evidence, and a false police report. Linda's voice cracked. I didn't think it would go this far. I thought if I could show him how much the property was worth, he'd thank me. Oh yeah, I said. That's how I usually react when someone breaks into my house, invites strangers over, and offers to sell my stuff for a great deal. Total gratitude. Sergeant Williams turned to her one last time. You unlawfully entered a residence, attempted to sell it without consent, called 911 under false pretenses, and endangered your license, possibly your freedom. You understand how serious this is. I do now, she muttered, her voice finally small. He motioned to Martinez. Cuff her. As the cuffs clicked into place, Linda turned to me. I was just trying to help, she said, tears threatening. I tilted my head. Help yourself, mostly. She was walked out to the cruiser, clip-clopping in her $200 heels, still clinging to the last shreds of dignity, like they were coupon codes she couldn't redeem. And just like that, the HOA queen was dethroned, in handcuffs, under arrest, and very likely on her way to starring in a courtroom drama no one asked for. There's something surreal about watching someone get shoved into the back of a police cruiser in front of your cabin, especially when that person tried to sell said cabin while you were supposed to be out of town. It felt like a deleted scene from an HBO miniseries, Fraud by the Lake. The Linda Morrison Story. As the taillights disappeared down the winding road, Sergeant Williams remained behind, flipping through his notepad like he was trying to confirm that yes, this was actually his Tuesday. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "I've seen some HOA power trips, but this one might make the Hall of Fame. She's been building toward it." I replied, still holding the lockbox like it might bite me. Violation notices. Unsolicited valuations. The occasional threat disguised as community concern. You'd think I was operating a black market tire fire back here instead of reading books on a dock. Williams smirked. "We'll be forwarding everything to the county prosecutor. We'll also begin a deeper investigation into her activities. Honestly, if she pulled this stunt with you, chances are this wasn't her first rodeo." I raised an eyebrow. "You think she's been targeting other properties?" He nodded. "Most con artists don't stop after one success, or in her case, one spectacular failure. Wouldn't shock me. She's got ambition. The criminally stupid kind." He chuckled, then turned serious. "We'll need a full written statement from you, and we're going to get a warrant for her phone and real estate records. You might want to check if anything's missing inside the cabin." "She didn't take anything," I said, "but she tried to sell everything." After he left, I just stood in the living room for a few minutes. Everything looked the same. Same cozy furniture, same scent of cedar and coffee, but it felt different. Like someone had tried to turn my sanctuary into a listing on Zillow. I did a quick walkthrough, just to be sure. No items missing. No damage. She hadn't touched my bedroom or kitchen, but I did find a brochure in the trash can titled Pine Ridge Prestige Living, the hidden gem of lakefront luxury. Inside was a picture of my dock. My dock. The nerve of this woman. Around 11 p.m., my phone rang. "Mrs. Chun, I saw them take her away," she said, voice low and calm, like a retired ninja librarian. "Yeah," I sighed. "That happened." There was a long pause. "I thought something was off," she finally said. "I've seen strangers in your driveway several times in the last few weeks. Well-dressed people. Looked like they were on a house tour, not visiting a neighbor." My stomach twisted. "You're sure?" "At least 3 separate times," she said. "Once with a tall couple in matching fleece vests. Once with a guy in loafers and no socks. Classic out-of-town investor energy. And once with a woman who asked me if the neighborhood was friendly to renovations." I rubbed my temple. "Did you see Linda with them each time?" "Every time. Clipboard, tablet, fake enthusiasm." So this had been going on longer than I thought. "She never even tried to ask me for permission," I said. "She just assumed I'd be too far away, too busy, or too stupid to notice." "She underestimated you," Mrs. Chun replied. "That was her first mistake." The next morning brought more surprises. First, a detective from the county sheriff's office, Detective Sarah Mills, showed up with a calm demeanor and a gaze that could probably melt perjury. "Mr. Thompson," she said, shaking my hand with the efficiency of someone who didn't have time for pleasantries, "I've been assigned to take over the case from the local unit. We're expanding the investigation." "To what exactly?" "To Linda Morrison's other listings. We have reason to believe she's been conducting unauthorized showings on multiple properties. Most of them inherited homes, just like yours." I blinked. "You're saying I wasn't the only one?" "That's what we're trying to confirm. You're the first who walked in on it live, but we've already had 2 other property owners come forward after hearing what happened to you. Both of them inherited lake homes in the last year. Both received excessive violation notices. And both reported seeing Linda with visitors when they weren't around. Let me guess. She claimed she was helping. Or assessing safety risks," Mills said. "Same script. Different properties." I shook my head. "And people wonder why I don't go to the HOA barbecue." Detective Mills took out a notepad. "We'll need a full timeline from you. Every interaction you've had with Linda since inheriting the property. Violation letters, emails, anything that could establish a pattern." I spent the next 2 hours recounting everything. The day I moved in, the first friendly note about my dock being a liability, the citations for grass length, mailbox design, bird feeder placement. Each one more absurd than the last. "She wasn't just testing my patience," I said. "She was building a pressure campaign, trying to wear me down so I'd sell. And when I didn't, she skipped straight to plan B. Sell it anyway. Mills nodded, scribbling furiously. She's what we call a quiet coercer. Leans on authority, masks her intentions as community service. These cases are hard to prosecute until someone like you catches them in the act. Well, I said, glad I came back early. That might have saved half the street. Before she left, Mills paused at the door. We'll be issuing search warrants for her real estate files. If she's done this before, we'll find it. And what happens then? She loses her license, faces multiple felony counts. And if it turns out she's made money off any of these fake listings, she'll be facing grand larceny on top of everything else. Finally, a silver lining. The beauty of living in a small, gated community is that word spreads fast. The downside? Word spreads really fast. By noon the next day, everyone in Pine Ridge Estates knew something had gone down. And by 2 p.m., Linda Morrison's empire was collapsing faster than a cheap folding chair at a family barbecue. I couldn't walk my property line without catching sideways glances from joggers who had suddenly become very interested in community news. The neighborhood Facebook group, which I had wisely muted months ago, was now a full-blown battlefield. Someone had posted a blurry photo of Linda being led to the cruiser. The caption? HOA Queen or Real Estate Thief. Subtle. Then came the real chaos. Detective Mills returned that afternoon with an update, and the expression of someone who was equal parts impressed and appalled. Well, it's official, she said, handing me a copy of a search warrant affidavit. We seized her laptop this morning. Turns out she had digital folders labeled by property. Yours included. Full photos, fabricated listings, even mock contracts. Mock contracts. I said, jaw-clenching. Unsent, thank God. But prepared. She had 3 different versions of a purchase agreement for your property, each with slightly different dates. Probably shopping them around to different buyers. Was she planning to fake my signature? Most likely, Mills said. Or hit you with a cash offer and pressure you to sign quickly under the illusion that a deal was already in motion. I'd say I'm shocked, I said, but she tried to sell my bookshelf. At this point, I'd believe she forged the moon landing. Mills smiled grimly. That wasn't the worst of it. She also had financial projections, spreadsheets, projected commissions, notes about who she could lean on within the HOA to look the other way. Wait, I said, you're saying other HOA members knew? Unclear, but she had initials next to certain violations. We're investigating whether anyone else was benefiting, knowingly or otherwise. Of course she had an inner circle. Queen Karen never rules alone. The cherry on top? Mills handed me a list of other property addresses. We're contacting the owners. Most live out of state. At least 2 had no idea their properties had been entered without permission. I hope they sue the HOA into the Stone Age. Oh, they're not just going after the HOA, she said. The real estate board's already been notified. Her license is under emergency review. She'll be blacklisted by every brokerage in the state before she even gets arraigned. That's when the community began turning on her. Like clockwork. That evening, I went for a walk and ran into Greg Sanderson, treasurer of the HOA, husband to the world's most humorless woman, and the kind of guy who polishes his lawn flamingos. Thompson, he called, jogging over like we were on the same team. Heard about the incident. Just awful. Which part? I asked. The break-in, the fraud, or the part where she tried to sell my recliner? He forced a chuckle. Well, you know Linda. Always enthusiastic. Is that what we're calling felony burglary now? Enthusiasm. He cleared his throat. We're holding an emergency board meeting tomorrow. We'll be addressing the situation. Are you kicking her out? That depends on the vote, but I'd say the motion has momentum. Good, I said, because I've got receipts. And I'll be at that meeting. As I walked back, I passed Mrs. Elkin's house. She was another longtime resident who'd once threatened to report me for parking too parallel to my mailbox. She waved sheepishly from her porch. Mr. Thompson, I just wanted to say, I hope things are okay now. That whole mess with Linda, unthinkable. You ever notice her snooping around your place? I asked. Her eyes darted. Well, she did once ask for a spare key. Said she was checking on homes for security reasons. I stared. You gave her one? Well, she's the HOA president, she said defensively. Yeah, I muttered. That's what she wanted you to think. The next day's emergency board meeting was held in the HOA clubhouse, a pretentious log cabin that tried very hard to be rustic while also smelling like lemon-scented despair. It was packed. Folding chairs, standing room, people peeking through the windows like it was the finale of a soap opera. Greg opened the meeting with the enthusiasm of a man forced to eat humble pie in front of his entire church group. As many of you have heard, he said, not meeting my eye, our HOA president, Ms. Linda Morrison, has been detained by law enforcement. While the investigation is ongoing, we have decided to suspend her from HOA duties effective immediately. Suspended, not removed. I stood up. Question, I said loudly. How many board members knew she had a key to my cabin? Awkward silence. And how many violation letters were based on fabricated complaints? More silence. I've got video evidence, police reports, and a list of other properties she tried to flip like this was HGTV meets organized crime. So unless this board wants to be listed as accessories, I suggest you remove her permanently. That got applause. Mrs. Chun actually whistled. A motion was made. A vote was called. Unanimous. Linda Morrison was officially removed as HOA president, pending criminal charges, a civil lawsuit from me, and, if karma has a schedule, a full-blown collapse of her career. It was beautiful, and as I left the clubhouse, several neighbors approached me. Apologetic, supportive, grateful. It's funny. I'd inherited a cabin, but after this, I inherited a community. There are two kinds of court in America, the one with a judge and a bailiff, and the one held over coffee in kitchens, on neighborhood walks, and, God help us all, on Facebook. Linda Morrison was about to be convicted by both. The official charges were piling up like HOA violation notices on my doorstep. Breaking and entering. Attempted fraud. Filing a false police report. Unauthorized use of a duplicate key. And, my personal favorite, unlawful real estate practice, which sounds dull, but apparently carried a pretty juicy penalty in our county. But long before she got her day in front of a judge, she had to face something far worse, the wrath of Pine Ridge Estates. It started innocently enough, people whispering at the mailboxes, long glances at the community pool, phones snapping pictures of the for sale sign she'd hastily yanked out of her own lawn at dawn. And then someone, some blessed digital warrior, created a Facebook post titled, Linda Morrison, Pine Ridge's home-wrecking agent. The comments were brutal. She once fined me for having overly decorative curtains. And now this. She offered to help sell my mother's house before the estate was even settled. Anyone else notice she only targeted inherited homes? That's not an accident. She tried to show my place last fall, told the visitors I was considering offers. I wasn't. Someone checked the clubhouse keys. By the end of the day, the post had over 300 comments. Not bad for a community of retirees, remote workers, and overzealous birdwatchers. The HOA board, now scrambling like roaches under a flashlight, issued a rare community transparency statement. It was about as sincere as a reality TV apology. The Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association is committed to ethical governance. We are deeply disturbed by the allegations against Ms. Morrison and have begun a thorough internal audit. Translation, we didn't see this coming, but now we're terrified you'll sue us. And then came the news everyone had been waiting for. Linda's real estate license had been revoked. Not suspended. Not under review. Gone. Her brokerage firm, Wellington & Associates, cut ties immediately. Her smiling headshot vanished from their site like a magician's assistant. I heard from Detective Mills later that Linda had called them sobbing, angry, and confused, all within the same 5-minute conversation. I'd say I felt bad, but no. Meanwhile, I was practically a folk hero. Neighbors brought over baked goods. People waved who'd never looked twice at me before. One guy even dropped off a 6-pack with a note that read, "Thanks for taking down the dragon." Mrs. Chun, who had clearly appointed herself my unofficial publicist, began walking around town with the casual swagger of a woman who had known all along. "You were the match," she told me, handing me banana bread. But I was the wind that made the fire spread. I'll get you a cape, I replied. Linda, meanwhile, had gone into hiding. Her house, once the pristine showpiece of Pine Ridge, now sat dark. No Lexus in the driveway. No porch lights. No friendly, early morning HOA violation photos. But people still talked. Apparently, she'd been spotted at the county courthouse, screaming into a phone while dragging a rolling suitcase behind her like a business-class banshee. One woman claimed she saw her arguing with a man in a suit outside a lawyer's office. Another swore she'd been served with a civil suit from 3 different property owners. That last part? True. Detective Mills confirmed it. We now have a class action suit forming, she told me on a follow-up call. Several other property owners are banding together. You'll likely be asked to provide testimony, especially since you were the only one who caught her in the act. Happy to, I said. Just make sure I get a front row seat. But the most satisfying part came unexpectedly. On a Wednesday morning, no fanfare, just a knock at the door. I opened it to find Greg Sanderson, former HOA treasurer, looking like someone had forced him to eat kale for a week straight. Thompson, he muttered, holding out an envelope. The board wanted you to have this. It was an official letter, signed, notarized, stamped with the HOA's clunky logo. We acknowledge the significant stress and damages you endured due to the unauthorized actions of the former HOA president. As a gesture of goodwill, your annual HOA dues have been waived for the next 3 years. I looked up. You're paying me off? No, Greg said, clearly rehearsed. We're recognizing your unique role in protecting the integrity of Pine Ridge Estates. I folded the letter. Cool. I'll frame it. Next to the police report. He left, stiff as ever. Probably went straight home to write a strongly worded email to someone about my doormat being slightly too humorous. That night, I sat on my dock, drink in hand, and looked out over the lake. The water was calm. The sun was setting. And, for the first time in months, I felt at peace. No more violation letters. No more unsolicited market analyses. And no more HOA dictator trying to sell my house behind my back. Just me, the lake, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd taken down Pine Ridge's most dangerous predator with a phone camera and a healthy dose of spite. You'd think after watching Linda Morrison hauled off in cuffs, having her license torched by the real estate board, and seeing the HOA publicly disown her, that the saga was over. But Linda? Linda wasn't built for graceful exits. About a week after the HOA tried to sweep her existence under a rug labeled regrettable oversight, I got a manila envelope in the mail. No return address. No stamps. Just dropped in my box like it was too ashamed to be mailed properly. Inside, a handwritten letter. From Linda. The penmanship was elegant. The content? Pure delusion. Mr. Thompson, I'm reaching out in the hope that you'll reconsider your actions. What happened was a terrible misunderstanding, born out of miscommunication and, yes, a desire to protect the property values of our community. I believe we both acted emotionally, and I am asking that you request the DA drop the charges. Publicly, if possible. I am prepared to offer a formal apology and even support your bid for an HOA board seat, should you wish to pursue it. I had to read that last line twice. Linda Morrison offering me an endorsement? That was like Darth Vader offering Luke a lightsaber repair kit. Still, it gave me an idea. I showed the letter to Detective Mills, who read it slowly, then smirked like she'd just found a winning lotto ticket. You think she's trying to manipulate the narrative? She asked. Oh, I know she is, I said. But what if we gave her a stage? Mills leaned back in her chair. Go on. We hashed a little plan. Nothing illegal, nothing shady. Just strategic truth exposure. The HOA had called a community healing forum, because of course they had, to address the recent events and restore trust. It was basically a fancy way of saying, please don't sue us. I showed up early, sat in the back, and waited. Sure enough, Linda slinked in halfway through. Hair flat, blouse wrinkled, face sour. Her once dominating presence now reduced to a woman who knew the whispers were all about her. When the floor opened for public comment, I stood up and cleared my throat. Hi, I'm the guy whose cabin was nearly sold out from under him. You might remember me from such viral hits as Why is there a Lexus in my driveway? Scattered chuckles. I got a letter this week. I continued, pulling it from my folder, from someone asking me to drop charges in exchange for an apology and wait for it. Her support if I want to run for the HOA board. Gasps. Several turned heads. Linda visibly shrank in her seat. Now, I wasn't planning on running, I said. But the thought of cleaning up this circus suddenly feels like civic duty. Greg Sanderson, red as a tomato in a tie, cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson, perhaps this isn't the appropriate. No, Greg. This is exactly the appropriate place. Because this letter? I held it up. It wasn't just sent to me. It was sent to at least 2 other homeowners who filed reports. She's trying to negotiate her way out of consequences like it's a real estate deal. Detective Mills stepped forward from the back corner. Yes, she was there, in plain clothes, taking notes. We've confirmed that, she said. And for anyone who's received similar letters, we'd advise turning them over immediately. Witness tampering is a felony. Boom. You could have heard a hummingbird blink. Linda tried to stand. This is a witch hunt. I was framed. No, Mills said calmly. You were caught. There's a difference. Linda stormed out. Again. But this time no police escort. Just the slow death of her reputation, buried under truth, sarcasm, and a solid paper trail. That night, I got home and poured myself a glass of whiskey. Sat on the porch, my feet up on the rail, moonlight bouncing off the lake. The cabin was quiet. Peaceful. Mine. A few days later, I filed my candidacy for a seat on the HOA board. Mrs. Chin co-signed. Greg Sanderson tried to fake enthusiasm, but looked like he'd swallowed a fork. I didn't run to be political. I ran to prevent the next Linda. My campaign slogan? No lockboxes. No lies. Just logic. I won by a landslide. Turns out people like leadership without the felonies. So yeah, the HOA tried to bulldoze my peace. Linda tried to sell my life behind my back. And in the end, I turned the entire town against her, got her arrested, exposed her entire operation, and took her seat at the board. That's what happens when you cross a creative homeowner with a working phone camera and absolutely no tolerance for nonsense. Next time someone tries to sell your house without asking, crash the open house. With receipts. And maybe a little sarcasm. It works wonders. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.